let's get started. My name's Kevin Carter, the web guy for SABR chapter. Today we have Mark Stein with us. He's going to talk about his forthcoming book, uh, A League of His Own, story of A.G. Spalding, not
Mhm.
Spalding. And I'm just going to let him take it away. Nobody came to listen to me.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. I really appreciate you setting this up. And I just want to let you know I'm new to Sabre and a little intimidated by the knowledge that sits before me. But I was a journalist for a long time for the New York Times, the LA Times, and the Wall Street Journal, but never covered sports. I did when I was in high school, but not since then. I've been a business writer. So a lot of the book talks about the business that he founded and the business of the National League and how it operated. Um, but there's also lots of stuff about colorful games and uh, you know, crazy antics of King Kelly and people like that. Um, I will tell you that it took a long time for this book to come to fruition because I did it sort of in my spare time when I was holding down a regular full-time job. Um, so the visits to Coopertown were rushed. The ones to the New York Public Library were rushed. But I think I ended up getting pretty much everything I wanted. Um, but a lot of my friends are a lot less familiar with 19th century baseball than certainly I am, and I'm sure way far behind you guys. Um, but the question inevitably comes up, and Keith so kindly introduced it. Does he have anything to do with the Spalding? They all want to know. And of course, the answer is yes and no. Um, his company made millions of them, in fact, tens of millions of them. But they were all made long after poor Al was had passed away. So it's funny though, people ask about the Spalding, but they never ask about anything else that I think is more important, which is contributions to baseball as a player, as a captain, as a manager, team owner, globe-trotting baseball promoter, and uh, uh, and the head of the U.S. team to the Paris Olympics in 1900, which was as much a political appointment as anything else. But he's an interesting guy who's done a lot in his life, and although I mean people have written about him before, but not a full biography for about 40 years. So I figured there was enough time had elapsed that a new generation of people would be ready to learn Al's story. And the technological improvements in archiving and data retrieval have certainly made it a lot easier to do research. Thank God for newspapers.com and Sporting News online. They were fantastic help in getting it done. So if we start with Spalding's plaque in the Hall of Fame, it has a pretty good summary of his contributions to baseball. It calls him, of course, the organizational genius of baseball's pioneer days. It also notes he was a star pitcher of the Forest City Club, a small frontier team of players um, who famously defeated the barnstorming Washington Nationals in 1867 with Spalding, then still 16 years old, pitching against all these semi-pro uh, giant men pitchers or giant men batters. Um, he then moved on to Boston. Harry Wright uh, was so impressed by him that he made it Spalding the first person he chased after when he was hired to start the Red Stockings in Boston. So he was in Boston from 1871 to 75, winning four out of the five championships at the National Association for professional baseball players before it finally bit the dust. And he came over to Chicago at the behest of grain trader William Hulbert, um, who was looking to build a team that would show Chicago had outlived the fire and was back on his feet. and wouldn't be interfered with by Eastern snobs who had robbed Hulbert of several good players from the East that he was trying to hire, including most famously Davy Force. Um, so Spalding came out to Chicago, played only 1 year, and then he did what he had been planning to do for several years, which is open a Spalding sporting goods store with his brother Walter, 4 years younger, um, and then later, of course, organized the famous around the world tour for baseball in 1888, 89. Um, but I think, my initial thought was that Spalding was an interesting, a good businessman and a shameless promoter of his interests, including baseball. But he was also a hell of a pitcher, it turns out. He set a lot of records, single season records while he was pitching, and he pitched 2,886.1 innings um, in championship games. And one of his records actually still stands to this day, according to Baseball Reference, which is the career winning percentage among pitchers who've pitched at least 1,000 innings. When he was playing, his clubs in Boston and Chicago won 80% of their games when he was the deciding pitcher. It's an astonishing fact. Um, and you look at pitchers today, and obviously they're throwing much harder, throwing much more sophisticated. Spalding was still pitching underhanded for his career and got out once the curveball came in because he could neither throw it nor hit it. Um, so, but I think it's just fascinating. He has this 150 years, his record has stood, and it seems unlikely anybody's going to win more than 80% of the games today or have a decision in it. And I also was impressed that he was the impetus for founding of the National League, because when he left Boston for Chicago, he signed a contract in the middle of the season and against the rules of the National Association at the time. And he and Hulbert were afraid that they were both going to be kicked out of the league. So they decided to start their own league. And that's where uh, I got the name for the title, which was always a placeholder title until I saw proof for the cover, and the publisher liked it enough that they used it there. So that's now the title I'm stuck with. So yeah, and the summer of 1875, while he's still employed by Boston, he ran off to Chicago with the guarantee of part of the gate, a quarter of the gate, which is astonishing, as well as a very large salary of, I think, $2,000 plus bonuses. And that year he made something north of $6,000 in 1876 dollars, which no other baseball player reached or exceeded that number for like 30 years. So, he's just a very interesting guy, very well regarded, obviously, in his day, but strangely sort of not well known now. There are other 19th century players who are better known. Certainly, again, to the early 20th century, they're much better people known. So I just thought it was worthwhile to raise him from the the depths of obscurity and give him a little love. Um, the problem he found was when he was playing with Boston was that the National Association was a weak league and unwilling or unable to enforce its own rules. So you had a lot of gambling, a lot of drinking, including on the field, fist fights on the field and in the dugout. And it was just a mess. I mean, nobody was paying, fewer and fewer people were willing to pay 50 cents to watch, basically something they could have found at 5 points or something like that. Um, so when, so when he had a chance to scoot, he did, and brought with him, of course, obviously, Cap Anson and other players that were stars at the time. It was quite a haul for Chicago, who promptly went on to win in the 1876 championship, not surprisingly. Um, but when he was at the National Association, seeing its public reputation being destroyed by gambling and drinking and brawling and all that, it just reminded him of his signature early experience when he led the Rockford Forest City to beat the National Club from Washington in 1867 when he was, as I said, still 16 years old. It was to him uh, the epitome of what he could have hoped for as a player. You know, he was only a kid, but to make that kind of splash, and the upset was news in papers across the country, I was surprised to discover. Um, you know, it was a great thing for him. His teammates were wildly happy. The game was played in Chicago. They kept their uniforms on, strutted around the city. Um, but then uh, the next day, the Nationals played the Illinois State champion team, the Excelsior, who had twice beaten Forest City that year, and was expected, if Forest City beat the Nationals, why couldn't the Excelsior? But of course, the Nationals were humiliated by losing to this country bumpkin team, and he came out furious against the Excelsior and absolutely thrashed them. Um, and that got newspapers thinking this stunning reversal had a little smell to it, and they were uh, quick to jump out that to report, truthfully or not, I don't know, the prevailing sentiment among the greater portion of those who witnessed the Rockford game was that the Nationals had purposely allowed Forest City to win to improve the odds when they were playing Excelsior the next day. Um, Now, there certainly were gamblers who were following the Nationals around and cleaning out locals of their spare change because they knew much more about how the teams played and what was to be expected. But for Spalding, what had been a glorious victory on Thursday night was by Monday morning, in the eyes of many people anyway, a fraud and a joke and something to be taken not seriously at all. One newspaper praised once praised as stunning. The Forest City triumph was demoted in the papers to inglorious and then false in the popular press. And I think that really stung Spalding. And he never got over it. I mean, he was never a big gambler. He was pretty uh, conservative guy when it came to, he didn't drink, he didn't smoke, he didn't gamble. But, I think that made him really want to erase that stigma from the game, stigma of gambling and game fixing and all that sort of stuff. Um, so, I just thought it was interesting that gambling then was a problem, and here, with the NBA scandal unfolding, and sportsbook gambling growing tremendously. I think I read somewhere it was $13 billion in revenue in 2024. That it was interesting to go back and look at what Spalding had to say about it. It had, for example, the National Association in 1875 had 13 clubs that paid the very low membership fee of $10 in order to compete for the pennant. But of the 13, six, the Atlantics of Brooklyn, Centennials of Philadelphia, Elm City of New Haven, Nationals of Washington, and Red Stockings of St. Louis, and the Westerns of Keokuk, Iowa, were all out of business before the end of May. So, I mean, they didn't last 2 months. Six others were in business, but way out of contention. Boston was kicking people's asses. And they did won their fourth consecutive association championship. But people who wanted to bet on the Red Stockings in Boston would be hard pressed to do so because Boston's president, Ivers Adams, was strong enough to enforce rules against gambling and drinking and all that. In fact, he said when the scandal, when a local scandal broke, he said, "We have not allowed the sale of intoxicating drinks on our ground and that other attendant evil, betting, has been strictly prohibited. These provisions, we believe, has assisted in drawing the better class of our people. And that was always secretly what Spalding wanted to do if and when he had a chance to run a team, which is have a team that would attract the bourgeoisie and people of character and wealth, women as well as men, children as well as grown-ups, and all that required getting rid of gambling and drinking and fighting. But while the Red Stockings were able to control things, the rot throughout the rest of the association was too obvious to ignore. The St. Louis Globe Democrat cautioned in 1875 that the doings of certain slippery ball tossers lately have increased the unreliability of players to a very great extent. And unless the boys and certain managers have a care, they will run the professional game so far into the ground that it cannot be pulled out. So Spalding didn't have much faith that the National Association would ever reform itself adequately because each individual owner thought of himself only and not of the greater association. So they were out to make as much money as they can. I know that sounds like some owners today, especially in sports like football, but it's something that's been around for 150 years. We ought to get used to it by now. Spalding, years later, said, at that time, he recalled that the occasional throwing of games was practiced by some and no punishment meted out to offenders. This just stuck in his craw. And then he gave two particular games in 1875 that really showed the influence of pool sellers or gamblers. One was between Chicago and the Philadelphia Pearls, who used to be the White Stockings until Chicago rejoined the National Association after the fire, and another game between Boston and the Athletics. The Chicago Tribune reported that in the first game, quote, a parcel of bunco men, low gamblers, and general disreputables, unquote, raised a betting pool that would pay them between $300 and $500 if Philadelphia lost the game. They then found a player, quote, occupying a responsible position in Philadelphia's field, and this person promised to deliver on that outcome. The Tribune noted that the crooked player performed his share of the work to the best of his ability, making all the wild throws possible and muffing everything that came to him. When a Chicago player got wise to the fix, and it didn't take Sherlock Holmes to see what was happening, he demanded to share in the payout. He was rebuffed, and so he enlisted several teammates in Chicago to foil the Athletics' plan by making sure Philadelphia won, which it did, 5-4 in 12 innings. Signs of questionable play were abundant. 11 players on the two teams reached base on errors. Chicago pitcher George Zetlin made 11 wild pitches, and his battery mate Scott Hastings allowed 6 passed balls. Even in 1875, these were extraordinary numbers. Hastings, after all, was playing without a glove or a face mask, but 6 passed balls was extraordinary. Spectators who left the grounds were heard to describe the game as a base swindle on the public, according to the papers, but the National Association took no action. 3 days later, about 4,000 spectators came out on a hot and sultry Monday afternoon in Philadelphia to see the NA's best teams, the Athletic and the Red Stockings. The game was tied at 10-10 after 9 innings. Boston scored 2 runs on 5 singles in the top of the 10th and might have brought home more if a spectator in standing room only on foul ground had not interfered with a fair ball hit by Ross Barnes. When the spectator threw the ball toward the infield, Barnes stopped running, believing the ball was dead and the play had ended. However, an Athletics player tagged Barnes, and the umpire called him out. In their half of the inning, the Athletics got 2 men on base, but rang up 2 outs in doing so. The game was too close to suit the gamblers who were there, so they had known to bet $2,000, about $58,000 in current money, on the games. Their best hope to avoid losing money seemed to be a fast approaching rain squall. If it arrived in time, it would stop play, resulting in a 10-10 tie and voiding all bets. The Athletics' next batter, languidly strolled in the general direction of home plate, wasting time as the storm approached. The umpire ordered him to step into the batter's box, but the batter hesitated. Suddenly, bettors incited spectators in the grandstand to pour onto the field, easily overwhelming the 7 police officers assigned to the game. Play stopped and rain started. Even after the storm passed, the Athletics declined to resume play, saying the grounds were too sodden. The umpire gave up and declared the game a tie. The headline over the Boston Globe the next day decried the rowdyism in Philadelphia and stated the city of brotherly love was disgraced. The Philadelphia Times concurred, calling the rush on the field a disgraceful ending to the game. It added that a disturbance was not surprising after the poor umpiring in Boston a week prior, but noted that Philadelphia would have been wise to maintain its decorum, leaving to Boston all the dishonor. Of course, a game in which both clubs tried to throw the contest had plenty of dishonor for everyone involved. Such widely reported incidents showed Spalding and others to the professional game how the association had failed to make any progress in excising gamblers' influence over the sport since a scorching New York Times editorial 3 years earlier had stated that professional baseball was not the national game, but merely, quote, an event for the benefit of the betting fraternity, unquote. It added that the professional player, though doubtless occasionally an honest and inoffensive fellow, is usually a worthless, dissipated gladiator, not much above the professional pugilist in morality and respectability. Players frequently lose games on purpose, the editorial writer asserted. It is only necessary for the gambler who has large sums at stake to buy a player in order to make certain that he wins his bets. The effect of all this licentiousness, was exactly what he feared: diminished attendance by respectable bourgeoisie. As Spalding noted, a game whose spectators consist for the most part of gamblers, rowdies, and their natural associates could not possibly attract honest men or decent women. Spalding's vigorous antipathy toward gamblers was fed, at least in part, by the widespread belief that his signature achievement to that point, leading his hometown to an upset over the Washington Nationals, had been fixed by gamblers. The fact that his own local Chicago Daily Tribune said it without any proof that the Nationals had purposely allowed Forest City to win to set up the betting for the second game against the Excelsior. Indignant editorials in Chicago's Sunday newspapers kept the controversy a boil. Ignoring the exceptional pitching by Spalding, the solid defense behind him, and the sloppy condition of the field, editorial writers at the Tribune and the Republican did not appear to even consider that Rockford may have won legitimately. Instead, they claimed that the Easterners had no qualms against rigging games to win bets for professional gamblers who accompanied them. The Tribune characterized the Nationals tour as a regular confidence game. For good measure, they accused the Nationals of being a pick nine, by which they meant professional paid players, which was no small insult at a time when true gentlemen played only for the love of the game and its muscular and social advantages. Histories show that gambling and sports have natural mutual attraction, and we should prepare for trouble because so much is at stake. As I noted earlier, the U.S. sports betting industry posted record $13.7 billion in revenue in 2024, and that is expected to grow by at least 20% this year. To end on a final note, that critical question, was Spalding responsible for the Spalding? Well, I think as I hinted earlier, the answer is yes and no. He had died long before the ball appeared on the streets of Hoboken and Brooklyn and other areas around New York City. But Spalding, the company, certainly made it and made a fortune off of them. That's the end of my prepared remarks, and I'd like to hear any questions or comments that you guys have.
Trying to unmute. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
I I learned a lot. One thing I didn't realize at all was how good a career he had. You mentioned the um, thousand innings pitched, and I mean that'll never be eclipsed, I'm sure. So that's interesting. I'll have to look on Baseball Reference tomorrow.
Yeah, I mean, he did have the advantage, let's not forget, of pitching underhand. Um, but I guess he was a pretty fast pitcher, even there, and had a killer changeup that had exactly the same angle, arm angle, and arm motion. Batters could never tell what was coming. An 80-mile fastball or a 60-mile changeup.
Was pitching underhand the norm, or just
Yeah, that
something
was
that
that
he?
was that was the standard for baseball at the time, for at least until 1880s, I think, when they slowly let the arm angle creep up until people were just throwing overhand. But he did blow out his elbow, at least.
Yeah, Spalding reminds me of um, the people that made it rich in the from the California gold rush. I mean, very few people discovered gold out there when they went to seek their fortune. But the people that became wealthy were the people that supplied the miners, with picks and shovels and with Levi's jeans and so forth. Though, how did Spalding how did Spalding decide to get into the sporting goods line? Because obviously Chicago, you had Spalding, you later had Wilson, as a top supplier of sporting goods. You had the um, well, the nation's largest stockyards there. So you had the byproducts, animal byproducts, of course, the leather, the pigskin.
That's where Wilson came from.
You had the distribution center of the railroads
Yeah,
as the country's preeminent rail center.
yeah, all true. I mean, Spalding got a head start. He got the idea, I'm sure, from other players, especially in Boston, where George Wright, Harry's younger brother, um, opened his own sporting. Well, he mostly sold baseballs. It's hard to call him a sporting goods store. He sold baseballs and perhaps bats, but he did it out of his cigar store. So it was pretty rudimentary, but it's planted a seed in Spalding's brain. Um, and he saw other people in New York and Hartford and places like that also doing the same thing, players selling the equipment to other players. Um, and I think that's where he got the idea. And by the time he started in 1876 in Chicago, there were two other stores that I found that called themselves sporting goods stores, but they really were toy stores and just had a glove, not a glove, a ball or a bat, um, off to one side. It wasn't anything close to what we would call a sporting goods store today. And yes, Wilson did come along and ultimately surpassed Spalding in size. And they were just it started as an offshoot of one of the Armor, I think, meat packing company.
Wilson. Yeah, it was Armor. I thought it might have been Wilson Packing House though, because it was located originally across the street from the stockyards, I believe.
Is that right? Yeah.
Yeah,
But, it was exactly what you thought. I mean, the offal from the slaughtered cattle and the hides were, I mean, leather was very valuable for making shoes and later gloves. Um, so yeah, you're right. Chicago was a natural, and I don't know if Spalding thought of it in that way or not. I mean, he was a pretty smart operator, but hard to predict the future. Um,
Did he become successful merely because of his name, or were there other? You know, was he more a really savvy businessman?
he became wealthy because he was lucky enough to start his business in the Gilded Age when monopoly was a great idea. So he just went through and bought out Mr. Mon had the first ball that the national or the professionals wanted to play with. So he went in and bought Mon, and he later bought out, Wright and other suppliers. He just consolidated the industry into one large company and a few small scattered ones.
Mm.
But to keep the illusion that there was competition, he would never change the name of a company after he bought it. He wouldn't turn Mon balls into Spalding balls. He would sell Spalding balls and advertise that they were made just like Mon balls. Well, they were made just like Mon balls because Mr. Mon made them. But he was pretty sharp that way, realizing that a monopoly could generate uh, ill will among the buying public. And the Clayton Antitrust Act was being considered at that time too. So I'm sure he, like other businessmen, didn't want to attract too much attention to their monopolistic behavior. I don't know how it forced them to use these.
I'll just mention that he really was a pioneer in intellectual property and branding and marketing. And you look at his middle name, Goodwill. The goodwill is a very important term in intellectual property. It's how the trademark embodies the goodwill of a company. And he did things like, as you said, he paid the league for his ball to be the official ball. He did product placement. He wore a fielder's glove to promote its sale by his business. And he acquired, as you say, he acquired brand names, but used like Reach. He acquired it, but continued to have it appear to be a separate company. He published a baseball guide. So he really was an exploiter of intellectual property and a pioneer in that area.
Absolutely. And Kevin, what was interesting to find out was that he very shrewdly hired James Sullivan, the head of the AAU. They hired Sullivan to run his publishing house, the American Sporting, whatever. But at the same time, Sullivan kept his job at the AAU. And sure enough, within a couple of years, athletes were complaining that the AAU refused to recognize any new record that was set with equipment not sold by Albert Spalding. And when that caused an uproar, he changed it to defining the acceptable athletic gear exactly as Spalding was making it, to the point where if you had a discus with an iron rim, that was acceptable. A discus with a steel rim was not, for example. And the only reason they would do that is because Spalding was the only one making a discus with an iron ring. And he was very brutal about that. I mean, and in fact, kicked a lot of people out of sports altogether, including, Eckhart. I can't remember, Walter Eckhart, I think his name was, football player at University of Chicago, who was kicked out of college football because he played in a summer baseball league for which he received expenses. Who ran the summer baseball league? Albert Spalding, of course. He wouldn't cut slack to his own customers. He's a pretty bloodless guy.
Spalding also was sued for patent infringement for infringing a catcher's mask patent, and he lost that suit.
He did in 1886. Yeah, there was a student at Harvard had invented the mask a few years earlier, but didn't ever exploit it. So Spalding stepped in, decided that he would start to make and sell it. And yes, this student probably had graduated by then, but he sued and won. And in fact, Spalding, some of his mergers, that's what was ultimately his downfall in the business was. Well, first of all, his company, like other sporting goods companies, were absolutely battered by the Depression, when a baseball glove suddenly, wasn't as important as putting food on the table. And that people just stopped buying, I mean, nobody bought golf clubs or tennis rackets, none of that stuff. Except for the ultra rich, but there just wasn't enough volume to make it work. And after that, he went back to his old tricks of acquiring competitors, buying them out and merging them. and went one too far when he bought Rawlings in 1954. He didn't do it; his successors did. Bought Rawlings in 1955, and the Federal Trade Commission told him to unwind the deal. It took 5 years or something like that, and they stopped being the predator and started becoming the prey. They were acquired by baby bottle makers and uh, uh, surgical device makers and all kinds of crazy companies. Where this is in the middle of the conglomerate fad in American business. So they were chewed up and spit out, and finally sold off the golf business a few years ago to Callaway, I think it was. And the rest of the company, the names and IP and all the rest of it, went to Russell Athletic in Kentucky.
Wasn't he a big supporter of the Mills Commission with the baseball creation story to try to push Doubleday as the creator of baseball, the All-American Doubleday?
The commission was his idea, and he handpicked everyone who was on it. None of whom wanted to be on it, nor did they care what the outcome was, but he cared. And they could, several years elapsed when virtually no evidence appeared anywhere until suddenly this letter from a mentally disturbed minor in Colorado landed on a newspaper in Akron, claiming that he had been there in 1839 when the game was invented. And it was a complete nonsense. I mean, his assertion that oh gosh, who's the general? Why can't I think of the general's name? Abner Doubleday. Yeah. His claim that Abner Doubleday invented this game, drew it in the sand at Cooperstown, was just so much baloney, because he was actually a West Point cadet at that time and on the base at the university in 1939. Had no leaves that let him go back to Cooperstown, and he never mentioned baseball or having invented baseball or having even played baseball in his voluminous letters that he left behind. But Spalding agreed to accept this one letter from the fellow in Colorado, who, by the way, unfortunately, ultimately murdered his wife. So he was a very sad character. But I came across some document. I think it was a letter from Spalding to to a sports writer. I can't remember, but he said basically, this is just a lot of fun. I mean, he knew it was nonsense, but he said it was a lot of fun and it'll generate a lot of publicity, which it did, both cases. You just have to stop people saying it as if it's true. Abner Doubleday did not invent baseball.
We can chalk that one up to nation building myths.
So how many of you are 19th century geeks versus the more modern game? No one? Oh, Karen? Yeah, I have to say I had no interest in the 19th century until I started doing this, and I realized how fascinating it is and how much has changed and how little has changed in other areas. People complain about greedy owners and foolhardy players. Well, they've been around for a while, and I doubt they're going to change very much.
Okay.
But some of them are smart enough, like Spalding, to invest well, work hard outside of the game, and make themselves wealthy that way.
I find it interesting. It's rather 19th century baseball can be rather Byzantine, to follow, because there are so many different threads and so many dead ends to it. Though you have Boston rules and you have New York City rules, you have Philadelphia rules, though, and it's just it's interesting to look into that, but it can get Byzantine after a while, though.
Yeah, and some teams play for one season in one town and move on, change their name. Same team, but playing in a different place.
They misspell the name. Then that's what I find interesting.
Mm.
Everybody could go through all this time and they have 3 different names spelled. Or they've had no children, but then on the tombstone, they had 3 children. I mean, it's odd.
Yeah, it is odd. Well, he of course had a long-term affair with a friend of his from Rockford, and thanks to a newspaper database that gave me access to British newspapers, I was able to pinpoint the day that his real wife, Josie, checked into a hotel up in Warwickshire while Spalding and his mistress were left alone in London. And surprise upon surprise, 9 months almost to the day later, his second son arrived. Although he
See?
didn't acknowledge him until his first wife died.
Yeah, it's really interesting stuff.
And then that kid, unfortunately, went off and joined the British Army before America was in World War One, and was killed on the first day of the Battle of the Somme. Body was
Ooh.
never retrieved. So yeah, I mean, there are all kinds of threads that you're right, but they're just fascinating to follow. And for somebody with a short attention span and a big curiosity, that's trouble for me. My wife will come in and say, "Yeah, you've been sitting here for 7 hours. Why don't you get up and move?" So do we want to take any bets on the game tonight? Any prop bets? How many home runs does Otani hit?
No, thank you.
I'm just not gonna do that either. I'm with you.
I'm actually not a bettor, but my older brother is, and will bet on anything.
Well, I just think it's interesting that they're trying to study Otani. I'm sorry, but okay, what's he supposed to be studying? I mean, you're gonna study him because he's good.
Yeah, he is one for the ages, that's for sure. I feel
He
personally
is.
lucky to be able to watch him play.
I know, it's like he's his own idea. He's his own baseball game.
Yeah,
I'm really surprised that he went back to pitching, but it doesn't seem to have affected anything. He's like Superman.
he is. He
That's
is.
true. He's, I think it's interesting that they're just smacking, like somebody will get hit in the face, somebody will get hit in the knee. I mean,
Yeah,
they're just, at one point, it's like, hey, come on, guys, this is baseball. It's not something else, but. So I
it's,
have one question for you. Does anybody who got to did things with bad betting, did they get punished at all or banned from anything?
I'm sorry, these are which people you're asking about?
Oh, I was just asking about, you were talking about all these people that somebody would bet something. Was there any punishments?
Not during the National Association years. There's absolutely none.
Okay.
And in fact, some uh, team owners set aside special places in the grandstand exclusively for bettors, so gamblers could find them easier and place their bets.
All right, thank you. Just wondering.
Yeah. And now, of course, it's a legitimate business.
You know, it's like FanDuel.
I mean, I'm sure most of them are probably honest, but we're going to see more things like the NBA where players are used to draw the suckers into, rigged games or, shaving points and all that stuff. I mean, it's just, there's too much money at stake. It's inevitable.
All the leagues have a hand in it. They're all for it.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I'm sure they're making a mint. Absolutely. But then, teams and owners have fleeced their customers for many, many years.
Hmm.
Yeah, remember when Mickey and Willie were banished because they were
Oh, yeah.
greeters
yeah.
At a
casinos?
casino, I know. Shocking.
Okay, so it's almost 8 o'clock. If no one has anything else, I'd like to thank Mark on behalf of the chapter. This is being recorded, so it'll be on the national site and our website eventually.
Thank you.
And
Thank you very much.
Everyone.
Thank you, Mark.
Oh wait,
I appreciate your time.
there is a chat thing here I didn't look at. Sorry, hold on.
Very good. Thank you.
Oh, okay. All right, everyone have a good evening. And
Thank you.
thank you again, Mark.
Thank you.
We'll talk to you soon.
Good night.
Appreciate it. Good night.
Bye-bye.